Last time we talked about the forgotten pioneers of early 3D fighting games, the janky legends, the beautiful disasters, and the accidental masterpieces that helped shape the genre. For those who haven't watched part 1, it's a blast, go check it out, it's on my channel as well as the link being in the description. But now we enter a different category. A strange category, a cursed category, a category that asks one very important question. Does this even count as a 3D fighter? Because some games try to go 3D, kind of went 3D, but also stayed 2D, and somehow got trapped in this weird dimensional limbo between universes. These are the games that couldn't commit, couldn't decide, and accidentally created some of the strangest fighting game experiences ever made. And our first resident of this multiverse mishap is Chapter 2. Does this even count? Let us talk about Street Fighter EX. Let us begin with the Street Fighter EX series. Developed by Ehrgeiz, which later went on to develop Fighting EX Layer, Street Fighter EX was Capcom's bold experiment. Take the classic Street Fighter formula, toss it into 3D, and see what sticks. This is very Street Fighter in 3D, but also not really 3D, but also kinda 3D, but also very, very PS1. It's like Capcom took Street Fighter, tossed it into a 3D blender, and called it modern. The graphics changed, but the core gameplay is still pure Street Fighter. And just a quick heads up, all of the footage you're seeing here is from Street Fighter EX Plus 2, since it has a bit more going on than the original, at least in my opinion. Even though the characters are fully polygonal now, the game still plays like classic 2D Street Fighter at its core. There's no true 3D movement, no sidestepping, no ring outs, no lateral dancing like Tekken or Tobal. You're still locked into a traditional left to right plane where spacing, reactions, and timing matter more than camera tricks. Footsies feel straight out of Street Fighter 2 and Alpha. Whiff punishing, controlling space with strong normals, checking jumps with reliable anti-airs, all the fundamentals are intact. You're constantly jockeying for that perfect mid-range poke or knockdown just like in a classic arcade cabinet. Projectiles behave exactly how they should. Clean, straight-line fireballs like God intended. No weird depth angles, no accidental whiffs because someone leaned slightly into the Z-axis. Zoning still works the way longtime Street Fighter players expect it to. So yeah, it looks 3D, but it plays like a 2D fighter wearing a blocky Halloween costume. And honestly, that weird contradiction is part of the charm. The EX series absolutely embraced bizarre, lovable late 90s character design, and nearly everyone on the roster brings a totally different playstyle to the table. Here are a few highlights. Skullomania, a luchador skeleton with wild rushdown energy. He's goofy, explosive, and somehow became the series mascot almost by accident. Iconic. Period. He's not just the mascot though. Skullomania actually has a raging demon, where he unloads a flurry of punches and kicks on his opponent complete with that over-the-top energy. On top of that, in the middle of that sequence, he sits on the floor and plays what looks like a game of shogi or something. This character is peak, and all that I can ask for is for Capcom to bring him back in Street Fighter 6, please. I beg of you. Kuruda, a spiky demon origami nightmare who hits like a truck and absolutely steamrolls you if you don't understand his pressure. Nanase, a young staff-wielding fighter who plays completely different from the rest of the cast, focusing more on range and control rather than raw brawling. Doctrine Dark. Bro had issues, a knife-wielding assassin with traps, weird angles, and some genuinely unhinged energy. Volcano Russo is a hot-headed Italian powerhouse who fights exactly how he sounds. Loud, aggressive, and constantly exploding with pressure. He's built around rushdown punches, fiery specials, and scary corner control that lets him bully opponents once he gets close. Crackerjack, that is his name by the way, is what happens when a Wall Street gremlin snaps and decides the solution is crime. With a baseball bat. He's all about controlling space with massive swing arcs, awkward hitboxes, and pressure that feels way scarier than his goofy animations suggest. Each character moves differently, has unique combo paths, distinct hitbox behaviors, and specific matchup strengths and weaknesses. The individuality feels more like Street Fighter Alpha than the original Street Fighter 2, giving every fighter a strong sense of personality. Next, I would like to discuss the moveless mechanics, starting with specials. Still classic Street Fighter motions, fireballs, DPs, charge moves, just animated in a chunky, early 3D style. The inputs remain familiar so legacy players can slide right in. Super cancels. You can chain specials directly into supers, letting you convert stray hits into real damage like a cracked out alpha game. Juggles. EX leaned harder into extended juggle systems. While the vertical space is limited, popping enemies into the air and keeping them suspended adds a pseudo 3D feel and flashier combo expression. Finally, the normals. Standard punch and kick layouts, but the polygon models give attacks slightly different reach, angles, and spacing compared to traditional sprites, which subtly changes neutral interactions. Next, let's cover the unique systems of the game. The guard crush / extra damage mechanic. Repeated pressure can crack an opponent's defense, rewarding smart offense and forcing players to respect sustained pressure instead of turtling forever. 3D positioning for visual flavor. While movement stays mostly 2D, slight depth shifts can affect how certain hits connect or juggle, creating occasional "how did that work" moments that feel uniquely EX. Excel mode. This game's defining mechanic, functioning similar to custom combos in Street Fighter Alpha 2 or the A groove in CVS 2. You activate it by pressing a punch and a kick of different strengths, spanning 1 meter. Once active, you can actively cancel normals into other normals or specials, letting you create fast, creative pressure strings and improvised combos. XL activates with brief invincibility, making it useful for blowing through gaps, wake-ups, anti-airs, and punishes. It lasts about 2.5 seconds, during which pushback is heavily reduced and juggle gravity increases, keeping opponents close and grounded. Damage is lower per hit, so smart routing and variety matter more than raw power. As we know, secrets and hidden characters were prevalent in that era of fighting games, so Street Fighter EX is no stranger to that concept. Another thing people completely forget about with Street Fighter EX is that it was absolutely packed with hidden characters, not just lazy palette swaps. These were legit fighters with their own animations, movesets, and personality, which made unlocking them feel like cracking into forbidden developer content. Here's who you could uncover. Kairi, returning from the original EX as a hidden challenger, bringing back his clean fundamentals and familiar playstyle for longtime fans. Shadowgeist, a mysterious costume vigilante who feels like Skullomania's edgy cousin, flashy, dramatic, and extremely comic book energy. Hayate, a wandering samurai who specializes in long-range pressure using sword thrusts, flips, and sweeping slashes to control space and keep opponents locked down. He's all about precision, spacing, and clean fundamentals, which makes him feel totally different from the more brawler-style characters in EX. A fun piece of trivia is that Hayate is actually the only character from the original Street Fighter EX2 who didn't return in the arcade version of EX2 Plus. Instead, he shows up as a hidden character in the PlayStation release, and he's also the only EX character who never made the jump to Street Fighter EX3, which is very strange to say the least. Garuda, the boss version. Back again, but this time as a powered up boss character with nastier pressure and scarier damage than his normal version. There's also a Cyclone style hidden character similar to Cyclone Beta from the original EX that can unfortunately only be unlocked via a cheat device. What a bummer! But the real magic of this era? The way people actually discovered this stuff. At the mode select screen, highlight bonus, game, and input. Select, up, select, up, select, left, select. Yeah, totally something a human being would naturally discover, right guys? If you did it correctly, the game would hit you with the classic message, a new character is now available. Codes to unlock characters in these old fighting games are simultaneously the most horseshit and coolest things I've ever seen, while usually being discovered by people who bought gaming magazines back in the day, which is a fascinating piece of gaming history, a form of gaming archaeology if you will. The EX series wasn't just a one-off, there were multiple versions and sequels, each refining the formula. Starting with Street Fighter EX1, it had Street Fighter EX and Street Fighter EX Plus Alpha, which upgraded the first EX, adding new moves, balance tweaks, and some other extra hidden characters. Moving on to Street Fighter EX2, it had Street Fighter EX2 Plus, which also expanded the roster, improved graphics, tighter mechanics, and added more minigames. Street Fighter EX3, the final entry in the series, released as a launch title on the PS2, featuring a massive roster, new gameplay mechanics, and higher quality polygon models. So yeah, EX was experimental, weird, and sometimes chaotic, but it laid the groundwork for modern 3D tinged fighters and gave hardcore fans a ton of depth to explore. So why did EX get forgotten? My guess for why it was forgotten was that Street Fighter EX3 launched on the PS2 the same day Tekken Tag Tournament came out. And guess which game everyone was playing? Also due to the fact that there was an oversaturation in the fighting game market at the time, leaving this game in the dust as most of the people at the time thought it was clunky, disappointing, and mediocre. which is so sad because I don't even think this game is even that bad. It was a victim of circumstance in my opinion. EX basically disappeared until Ehrgeiz resurrected the vibe with fighting EX Lair, which is basically EX4 without saying EX4. So Street Fighter EX was Capcom testing the waters with 3D, keeping everything safe, controlled, familiar. But then Square said, what if we did the exact opposite of that? What if we took a fighting game and made it aggressively weird? Enter Ehrgeiz. Ehrgeiz feels like a game that was born out of a 2 AM brainstorming session where nobody said the word no. Developed by Dream Factory and published by Square, it's technically a 3D fighting game, but it does not play like Tekken, it does not play like Virtua Fighter, and it most definitely does not play like Street Fighter EX. This thing is its own unpredictable little gremlin of a game, and I mean that with love. Ehrgeiz uses full 3D movement, but instead of tight sidesteps and careful spacing, the game is built around wide open arenas, no actual ring outs, momentum based movement, and characters that feel fast, slippery, and slightly unhinged. You're not just fighting your opponent, you're fighting the stage itself. Walls matter, edges matter, gravity absolutely matters. Matches can still only end in knockouts, sure, but there's way more freedom of movement than most fighters from that era, which makes every round feel chaotic, scrappy, and slightly dangerous at all times. This is where Ehrgeiz really separates itself. Instead of traditional punch and kick buttons, the controls focus on light and heavy attacks, throws tied to directional inputs, launchers that send people flying, air juggles that feel accidental but hype anyways. The moves themselves are pretty simple, but the depth comes from positioning, timing, and environmental awareness. You're constantly asking yourself, should I burn meter right now? How do I escape this corner? How do I get back up there without getting hit by a special move? To go more in depth about the mechanics of Ehrgeiz, it had some genuinely interesting systems, starting with momentum-based combat. Attacks carry real movement and weight, so every hit pushes characters across the stage, creating constant motion. It makes fights feel fast, slippery, and borderline out of control in a way that keeps both players scrambling to adapt instead of standing still and trading buttons. Arena-aware hit reactions. Getting clipped near walls, slopes, or edges changes bounce angles, knockback, and combo routes. You're not just fighting your opponent, you're fighting the environment, constantly adjusting spacing and positioning on the fly. Quick recoveries and knockdowns. Characters pop back up fast, pressure never really lets up, and matches rarely slow down. There's almost always something happening on screen which keeps the pace aggressive and chaotic from start to finish. Defensive options and interrupt system. Ehrgeiz actually gives you a surprising number of ways to stay alive in all that madness. You can guard by holding the block button against incoming attacks, keeping things familiar even when everything else feels unhinged. On top of that, you can tech out of knockdowns and air hits by pressing an attack button mid-air, letting you recover faster, escape combos, and avoid getting juggled into oblivion. But the real spice is the interrupt system. If you press the special button right before an enemy's attack connects, you can stuff their offense and break their combo, at the cost of some of your special gauge. It's basically a clutch panic counter that rewards good timing but punishes reckless spam. On top of all that, Ehrgeiz had a dedicated weapon/special meta that let characters pull out temporary weapons or absurd special attacks mid-match. And when I say weapons, I mean missile launchers, bombs, yo-yo staffs, and yes, literal meteor summons if you're Cloud or Sephiroth, because Square said balance is optional. These weren't just flashy gimmicks either, they completely changed pressure, spacing, and momentum for a few seconds. 1 second you're boxing in close quarters, the next someone's pulling out a rocket launcher in a fistfight. It added another layer of unpredictability on top of an already wild system, which made every match feel different, messy, and hilarious in the best way possible. It's madness, but it's intentional madness. Next, let's get into the game's roster. You've got a wild mix of original Square weirdness, anime energy, and designs that feel like someone mashed together 3 character archetypes and said, yeah, let's ship it. There's Hai Daehan, a straight-up Taekwondo specialist who feels like he wandered in from a much more serious fighting game. Clean kicks, fast pressure, and very I actually practice footwork coded. Then you've got characters like Joe who fight with this scrappy street brawler energy, lots of breakdancing, momentum-heavy hits, and even transforms into a wolf. This is beginning to sound like Bloody Roar, isn't it? And of course, there is Godhand. Bro, Godhand is one of those characters where you look at him and immediately go, wait a second. This man feels like a here, copy my homework but don't make it too obvious version of Jin Kazama with a little bit of Kazuya Mishima sprinkled in. I mean, look at him. The spiky anime protagonist haircut? Check. The edgy serious main character energy? Check. The fingerless gloves that scream I punch things professionally? Check. And his right hand is cybernetic, giving him an extra layer of "don't mess with me" menace. Then you dive into the moveset, and it gets even weirder. Godhand's moves draw from Kazuya Mishima, Jin Kazama, Heihachi Mishima, Bike Dusan, and Paul Phoenix, essentially a Mishima family reunion mashed into one character. His stances, punch strings, and launch attacks all carry that unmistakable Mishima vibe. That's why his resemblance to Jin and Kazuya feels so uncanny. It's not just visual, it's movement, style, and attack rhythm all rolled into one. Even his costume design nods to Tekken with a look reminiscent of Brian Fury's outfits, combining metal, leather, and that I mean business aesthetic. Every detail from the cybernetic arm to the edgy styling makes Godhand feel like Tekken's DNA to the core. The reason for all this Tekken influence might come down to Ehrgeiz's origins. It was actually the first project to come out of a licensing agreement that let Square develop games on Namco's System 12 arcade board, and it was even showcased at Namco's booth at the February 1998 AOU show. Even crazier, according to the Metal Man wiki, the PSX version still contains remnants from the arcade build, including early character names like Devil Kazuya and Heihachi Mishima. While none of these actually made it into the final game, I had no idea about this before doing research for this video. It honestly blew my mind that they were even planned for the game in the first place. And here's the part that actually sent me. Hilariously enough, his real name is actually Ken Mishima. Ken Mishima. You cannot make this stuff up. That's not even subtle. That's not plagiarism. That's a cameo with commitment. That's like changing Mario's name to Marco Plumber and hoping Nintendo doesn't even notice. At that point, the game isn't even winking at you anymore. It's staring directly into the camera and daring you to say something. What really sells it though is how he feels to play. He's aggressive, technical, and combo heavy. The kind of character that makes you feel like a tournament monster, ready to go 0-2 at your local. And honestly, I kinda love him for it. Bootleg Jin is still Jin adjacent enough for me to think he is fine. And then Square did the funniest thing imaginable. Yes, Final Fantasy VII characters are indeed playable, starting with Cloud, who swings the Buster Sword like the stage personally offended him. Then we have Tifa, pure speed, pressure, and relentless combos. And Sephiroth, feels like he accidentally wandered in from a boss fight. And yes, he can summon meteors. But it doesn't stop there. You can also unlock other Final Fantasy VII favorites. Vincent, beat the game with Tifa. Yuffie, beat the game with Cloud. And Zack, beat the game with all the Final Fantasy VII characters. I personally think it's a bit offensive that they didn't even include Barret in the game. I mean, he's only, the first party member you ever meet in Final Fantasy VII? But I digress. It's absurd and amazing that a fighting game like Ehrgeiz ended up doubling down as a Final Fantasy VII crossover playground due to being published by Square. For a lot of players, this was their first realization that fighting games could even do crossovers, and honestly, that novelty carried the game hard. Oh, and just in case Ehrgeiz wasn't already doing enough random nonsense, it also shipped with a full lineup of minigames. Because apparently someone at Square looked at this chaotic fighting game and said, cool, now let's make Mario Party, but unhinged. These modes feel like bonus content from an alternate universe, and I love them for it. Starting with Infinity Battle. Infinity Battle is exactly what it sounds like, a non-stop survival mode where you fight an endless stream of opponents back to back with limited recovery. Your health carries over between fights, so every mistake actually matters. Basically arcade survival mode, but somehow even more stressful and lasts forever. Battle Runner. Battle Runner throws fighting game fundamentals out the window and says congratulations, you're a platformer now. You race through obstacle-filled courses packed with traps, moving platforms, tight jumps, and hazards that absolutely do not care about your failings. Battle Beach. Battle Beach is Ehrgeiz pretending it's hosting a summer sports festival. Instead of straight up fighting, this mode helps blend 3 different minigames into one chaotic event. A beach sprint race where everyone rushes to reach the opposite side first, capture the flag where you run as fast as humanly possible to the other side to see who captures the red flag first, and obstacle running with hurdles and hazards you need to jump over cleanly or eat sand and lose momentum. And finally, Battle Panel. Out of nowhere, Ehrgeiz hits you with Battle Panel, a puzzle-based mode. Instead of throwing hands, you're flipping tiles, managing space, planning patterns, and racing against the clock. It's part strategy, part memory, part mild panic. It feels like someone accidentally left the puzzle game prototype inside the disc, and Square just went, yeah, let's keep it. Now, why do these modes matter? None of these modes needed to exist, and yet they kind of rule. They just show how experimental this era was. Developers weren't afraid to throw weird ideas at the wall and see what stuck. Some of it worked, Some of it absolutely didn't, but it made the game even more memorable in ways modern releases rarely risk. And then there's Dungeon Mode, which is technically still a fighting game, kind of, sometimes. Instead of traditional matches, you're dropping into a top-down dungeon crawler that plays like a full-on roguelike RPG wearing a fighting game skin. You're managing loot, weapons, stat boosts, and gear that actually change how your character perform, hunger meters, stay in the dungeon too long without eating and your character will literally start starving, traps, spike floors, ambush enemies, and surprise damage that will absolutely ruin a good run. Permadeath. When you die, the run is done. Back to square one, no mercy. Unless you have your partner alive, in which case she can revive you. Camera angles straight from the Shadow Realm, because PS1 cameras were legally required you to fight them at all times. So not only can enemies kill you, the floor can kill you, the traps can kill you, and the camera can kill you. Don't let yourself be defeated by the strongest boss in Ehrgeiz, malnutrition. Kombat still uses Ehrgeiz fighting mechanics, but now you're brawling monsters, navigating tight corridors, managing inventory, and praying you don't walk into a trap while your hunger bar is screaming for help. It's tense, it's weirdly addictive, and it feels like someone accidentally shipped an entire second game inside the disc. This mode had absolutely no business being this deep, and yet for a lot of players, it's just as memorable as the actual fighting game itself. So why did Ehrgeiz fade away? For starters, it was just too strange for a lot of casual fighting game fans. If you picked this up expecting something clean and familiar like Tekken or Virtua Fighter, you probably bounced off the slippery movement, weird arenas, and chaotic physics pretty fast. On the flip side, it also wasn't conventional enough for competitive players, and that's part of an educated guess, but the loose mechanics, wild stage interactions, and inconsistent balance didn't exactly scream tournament ready. And on top of all that, it launched in an era absolutely dominated by heavy hitters like Tekken, Virtua Fighter, Dead or Alive, and Soul Calibur. When you're competing against that lineup, being the weird experimental cousin is a tough sell. Ehrgeiz didn't really fit into any box, which is exactly why some people still remember it till this day. It wasn't polished, it wasn't balanced, but it was bold, unpredictable, and in its own strange way, unforgettable. Ehrgeiz feels like a time capsule from an era where developers were just experimenting. No patches, no esports roadmap, no endless balance updates, just raw ideas thrown into a game and shipped to the world. And honestly, I kind of miss that energy. Games like this remind me that creativity sometimes comes from taking weird risks, even if the result is messy, chaotic, and slightly broken. Sometimes that's what makes it special, but experimentation cuts both ways. When developers rush into 3D without fully understanding the technology or design implications, the results could be rough. Few games represent that growing pain more clearly than MK4, a franchise famous for reinvention subtly trying to redefine itself in polygon form. Let's talk about what worked, what absolutely didn't work, and why this era of MK still sparks arguments to this day. Alright, after all that wild 3D experimentation with EX, Ehrgeiz, and the others, it's time to talk about Mortal Kombat taking its first wobbly steps into 3D. Enter Mortal Kombat 4, the franchise's first official 3D fighter released in arcades and on the original PlayStation, and man, it shows. Starting with the gameplay mechanics, let's cover a few things, shall we? Starting with the polygons that hurt your soul. Characters look like cursed Lego statues. Those jagged edges make you almost feel the polygons cutting your fingers, although I can't dig too much at it as it was the style of the time. Weapons everywhere. Swords, axes, and other weapons spawn mid-fight, disappear just as quickly, and sometimes show up in completely random spots, turning matches into chaotic treasure hunts. An actual sidestep mechanic? This is where the 3D, so to speak, comes into play. You can either move away from the camera with run run or down run run to step forward along the Z-axis toward the camera, letting you adjust your positioning quickly yet awkwardly in a 3D space. Down plus run could also be used to pick up weapons and items scattered across the floor, which is a pretty creative mechanic and adds a bit of flavor to the game. Movement that's basically ice skating, walking, running, jumping. Every action feels like you're on a frozen pond. Timing attacks, combos, or counters is a test of patience. And luck. Fatalities and endings. The endings are hilariously low budget, some so absurd that they loop back into being iconic again. I laugh at how ridiculous Jarrek's ending is till this day. Just take a look at it.
The Black Dragon died with Kano. You're the last one, Jarek.
Never!
Come in, Major Briggs. This is Lieutenant Sonya Blade. What?
Then there's Mortal Kombat Gold, basically MK4 but slightly better. Graphics got a polish, character models and textures were slightly refined, lighting was a bit smoother, and backgrounds had more detail. Still blocky by today's standards, but it made the Dreamcast version feel like a proper step up from the PS1 and N64 ports. Controls felt more refined, combos connected a bit more reliably, movement was slightly less slippery, and special moves were easy to execute. It's subtle, but it made the combat a touch more enjoyable. Expanded roster, returning veterans like Baraka, Cyrax, Katana, Mileena, Kung Lao, and Sector made a comeback, giving fans familiar faces from slightly updated moves to animations. However, Sector wasn't accessible by just selecting him on the select screen. No, you had to first enable the cheat menu at the title screen by quickly entering up, up, down, down, left, left, right, right, in which you'll hear a confirmation sound or laugh if you want to call it that. Then you have to press start to access the main menu and press block plus run to open the cheat menu. Then finally holding L plus R and pressing up, 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 left, 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 A on the character select screen, and boom, you can now play as Sector. Other characters could be unlocked via hitting codes as well as Goro and Noob Saibot. Now, would it be old school MK if it didn't have a bunch of secrets, right? New stages. The Church, the Netherrealm, and the Soul Chamber were added, each with interactive elements and visually distinct themes that expanded the 3D arenas beyond MK4's original locations. And finally, the weapons and FMVs. Weapons had a few new spawn options and finishing moves got slightly updated cinematic flair. The FMV endings were also slightly improved with sharper visuals and cleaner animations, as well as an overall change to the intro, making them a bit small but welcome upgrades over the PS1 and N64 versions. Basically, MK Gold was an enhanced Dreamcast port, what you're seeing here. Kind of like how Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 upgraded regular Mortal Kombat 3. It's a band-aid on a broken arm, but in the story of Mortal Kombat's 3D era, it still matters. Now, why are Mortal Kombat 4 and Mortal Kombat 4 Gold worth remembering? Now, some of the games I covered in this section aren't exactly great 3D fighters. Far from it. I'm looking at you, Mortal Kombat 4. Some were awkward, some were clunky, yet they skated, fell, and glitched their way into history. But they're important because they represent the multitude of attempts at 3D the 90s era had to offer, including pre-established franchises that decided to also make the jump to 3D with varying degrees of success and failures. And honestly, I respect the attempts. You can't hate on ambition. Even most of them look like a Lego nightmare. Chapter 3: Bloody Roar. Before we even get into the gameplay, we need to discuss the intro FMV. Because good lord is it ugly. Like, aggressively ugly. The character models look like they're made of slightly melted action figures. The animation is stiff, the camera angles are doing backflips for no reason at all.
Here you are, sir, one Krabby Patty.
And everyone is striking poses like they're auditioning for a bargain bin anime opening. But somehow, it's also weirdly charming. This intro perfectly encapsulates early 3D FMV cutscenes, overly ambitious camera work, questionable facial animations, way too many slow motion spins, and absolutely zero chill. And then on top of all that, the game hits you with this loud, crunchy rock soundtrack that goes way harder than it has any right to. It's loud, it's ridiculous, it's dated, and it's honestly kind of perfect. It sets the tone immediately. You're about to play something unhinged, energetic, and extremely of its time, which describes Bloody Roar perfectly, as it wasn't about weapons, wasn't about stances, wasn't about points. It was about one thing. Beast mode, baby! At any point in the match, every character could transform into their animal form, and once that happened, the entire game shifted gears. Combo potential explodes. Beast mode opened up extended strings you just can't pull off as a human. Brutal hit effects, blood flying everywhere like someone accidentally turned on Mortal Kombat. New tools unlocked, claws, roars, leaps, and aggressive movement options that completely change how you approach fights. The Transformation Scream, a ridiculous over-the-top battle cry that somehow makes every match 10 times more hype. Crazy stage ringouts. If you got hit by a powerful attack near the end of the match, you would be straight up knocked straight through the wall and into the pavement, wall, lava, or anything else that waited for your opponent outside of the ring, which definitely gave off an extreme vibe similar to fighting vipers.
This fight was trivial.
Once you understood the mechanics, the beast gauge, the human versus beast movesets, and the sheer speed of combat, it became clear why certain characters stood out. Every fighter brought something unique to the table once they transformed, and some just overall owned the spotlight. Some fan favorites in this game include Yugo the Wolf, the poster child of aggression. Fast, relentless, and perfect for punishing mistakes, Yugo's wolf form turned him into a streaking nightmare that could tear through combos before you even knew it hit you. Gado the Lion, a heavy hitter who hit like a freight train. Every swing in lion form caused serious weight, making him devastating in close quarters, especially against characters who relied on speed, overpowered. Alice the Rabbit, tiny but deceptively dangerous. Don't let the floppy ears fool you. Alice's rabbit form was nimble, hard to hit, and packed enough punch to punish sloppy opponents, proving that even the cute characters could dominate. The Beast transformations didn't just look cool, they fundamentally changed how matches played out. Timing, positioning, and knowing when to transform could turn the tide of battle in a single combo. Let's cover the mechanics that made Bloody Roar stand out, starting with the Beast Gauge, a meter that controlled your transformation timing. Managing it was a game within the game. Rave Mode, a temporary power-up triggered by pressing the triangle button on PlayStation, which boosted your speed and attack strength, as well as the ability to link more moves together. However, it also dramatically depleted your Beast Gauge as a trade-off. Human versus Beast movesets. Your combos and priorities totally changed once you transformed. It rewarded strategy, not just button mashing. Fast-paced combat. Movement, attacks, and transformations were all lightning quick, making reaction time and positioning insanely important. Stage awareness. Just like every other 3D fighter, walls, ringouts, and spacing mattered just as much as the others, especially if you were trying to combo into a beast attack. Mid-air teching. Getting launched didn't automatically mean eating a full combo. If you hit a punch or kick while airborne, you could flip out of the juggle and escape before things got ugly. It could even tech off the wall as well. It rewarded quick reactions instead of just letting the combo rock you into oblivion. Running and jumping momentum. Building speed actually mattered. Sprint long enough and you unlock special running attacks like tackles and slides akin to that of Tekken. And if you really commit, you could launch yourself into absurdly high jumps. It looked ridiculous and felt awesome. Sidestep evasion. While blocking, a perfectly timed forward input would make your character slide off to the side instead of stepping ahead, letting you sneak around incoming attacks for some clutch dodge moments. Spam it carelessly though and you'll get blown up by guard breaks. A weird way to implement sidestepping, but honestly, it worked well enough. And for some reason, you could even sidestep during the announcer's intro before the round officially started. Not very far, but enough to make you go, wait, why is this allowed? No block button. Even though Bloody Roar also ditched a dedicated block button, opting for the classic hold back to block setup, it weirdly never felt awkward here. Instead of fighting the controls, everything just flowed. Your fingers stayed focused on movement, pressure, and timing, while the beast button actually felt like the real start of the layout. Blocking felt intuitive, transformation stayed one tap away, and the whole control scheme somehow clicked in a way most early 3D fighters never quite managed. Bloody Roar was fast, flashy, and fun as hell, and every match felt alive. But of course, after the series' fourth official entry, the fifth game was cancelled due to developer Hudson Soft closing its US offices and ultimately dying because of it. At the end of the day, Bloody Roar wasn't just another 3D fighter. It was controlled chaos in the best way possible. You had lightning-fast combat, wild beast transformations, parries that rewarded timing and confidence, stages that actually mattered, and characters that felt completely different once they transformed. Every match felt explosive, unpredictable, and alive. Even the presentation had personality. From those beautiful, ugly FMV intros that perfectly captured the era, to the absolutely unhinged rock tracks blasting in the background like the game was daring you not to get hyped. It wasn't the most balanced fighter, it wasn't the cleanest fighter, but it was bold, memorable, and unapologetically fun. The kind of game that sticks in your brain long after you put the controller down. And honestly, for a series that got cut short way too early, Bloody Roar still feels like it has way more soul than half the reboots we get today. The last real entry was Bloody Roar 4 on PS2 and the original Xbox, and then the series just suddenly vanished, and honestly, it deserves better. Whether that's a reboot or a true Bloody Roar 5, I'd love to see the series come back swinging. When you look back at games from this era, you realize something. This era wasn't afraid to be weird. Not everything had to be perfectly balanced, not everything had to be monetized to death. Sometimes the goal was just to make something wild and see what happens. Some of it aged gracefully, some of it aged like milk in the sun, but all of it had personality. And honestly, that's something modern games could use a little bit more of. If you have been vibing with this deep dive into forgotten 3D fighting game history, hit that like button and subscribe for more stuff like this. Hopefully you enjoy listening to me ramble about these ancient fighting game artifacts just as much as I enjoyed making it. Have yourselves an excellent day, and most importantly, peace out, everyone.